But the NCAA House settlement is finally approved. So what you guys out there need to know is that schools can now directly pay athletes for their play and their participation starting July 1st using revenue sharing. What's revenue sharing? Whatever they bring in ticket sales, whatever they bring in TV revenue, they can then take that money and share it directly with their players. There's other things involved with that, but that is the gist of it. And worth noting, the cap for the amount of revenue you can share per year is $20.5 million with your players. There's some schools that can immediately get up to 20.5. There's other schools, like we'll talk about in a second, the University of Memphis, that will not likely be able to reach that $20.5 million per year, but they can try to be as competitive as possible. But I think in the grand scheme of things, the question we're asking here tonight is how much of an impact does this have on the future of the University of Memphis athletic department?
I think you have some people that are a little bit more optimistic, but honestly, like you said, there are schools, non-Power 4 schools, smaller schools that will have a lot of trouble hitting that $20.5 million cap. Memphis definitely falls into that category because you have some schools that, baseball is going to bring good money in, and softball will bring decent money. Other sports, like for the University of Memphis, it's football and basketball. And with the TV contracts of the American and with the worrisome number of football attendance over the last couple of years, it's just like
basketball attendance ain't been much better.
No, basketball attendance hadn't been great either, but it just I don't know. I don't know what happens to schools like Memphis over the next several years with this. I mean, because I just don't know all the details of this yet. Like, can you still subsidize like you could this year with NIL? Can you still get money from businesses and have collectives, or does this do away with that? I don't know if you know. I don't know if you've.
I do know this. The collectives, they're trying to make name, image, and likeness money. So collectives, they're trying to minimize their impact with the house settlement.
They're trying to make them more of like that's where the advertising dollars come in for doing things for local businesses.
Yes,
it basically takes the NIL collectives to what they were supposed to be at the beginning of this and what they were for like a year. That's where businesses can contact players through a collective. That was my understanding too. I just wasn't 100%. So I don't know. I don't have a good answer on this. I don't think it's good for the University of Memphis. I think that's for sure. Right. I think it puts you immediately at a disadvantage with other schools, not necessarily on your level, because I mean, in the American, Memphis is still the top of the class, but the obvious answer to this becomes the obvious answer for the past 3 or 4 years, and it's that Memphis just has to continue doing whatever they can to get into a bigger conference with bigger TV deals where they can get more money off of that.
And you get better ticket sales at the gate when you have better teams coming into the FedEx Forum or Simmons Bank Liberty Stadium. I mean, it's that simple. I agree with you. I mean, that's ultimately the way out of this, but considering their position right this second, I think they're fine, like in the grand scheme of the AAC. But when we're talking about, the way things have been for a while, where you're in Division 1A football and you've at least been able to keep competitive with teams in the Power 4 structure and the power structure, it's just hard to imagine that consistently being the case. Like when we just look at the grand scheme of things, and this is not Memphis, this is just about everybody. I think that this is this case at Alabama, just like it is at UL Monroe. About 90% plus of your revenue generated in your athletic department is from football and men's basketball. Yeah. So based on this settlement, likely about, and this is the estimate that's been given, 90% of the revenue sharing is going to go to football and men's basketball. And I think for the University of Memphis right now, I'm curious about how they continue to operate as a fully functioning athletic department. What do I mean by that? Fully functioning means Olympic sports, men's and women's golf, whatever you carry, you're going to keep up all of those sports. It's hard for me to imagine them getting through this without getting into a better situation, sort of staying pat and being able to afford to keep up those sports.
Yeah.
It's very hard to imagine. For a long time, athletic departments have been subsidized by men's basketball and football, and that's just the days of that. They're completely over. And I'm concerned about their placement in the big picture. When we talk about getting into the power structure and being outside of it, I think they can own the lane they're in. But what's that lane going to be in 10 to 15 years if they don't get into the ACC or the Big 12? That's the question we need to ask. Now, one interesting tidbit I did see today is Boise State, who's outside of the power structure in the Pac-12. They're doing everything they can to try to get a new media rights deal and get some good revenue so they can share with their players. But Boise State, their AD, Jeremiah Dickey, their president, they've been talking about bringing in a private equity firm to work alongside them to give them an influx of cash to generate revenue to then ultimately pass down to their players so they can remain competitive with the top of football, that sport, remain competitive in men's basketball. And I was thinking about that at the University of Memphis, and I guess considering the circumstances on the table right now, I would have to ask the question, why not? Why not make that an option? I understand that getting into bed with a private equity firm can be a bit of doing a deal with the devil, right? If you don't fulfill your promises and boost the amount of money you're bringing in every year, and they ask you to start paying back that money, you could be shit out of luck, right? You could be bankrupt as an athletic department. But at the same time, if you want to remain competitive as you have been, it feels like that may be the only option. If you want to stay a top 25 team in basketball, if you want to stay a top 25 team in football, there's just only so many things you can do, and that may be an option out there on the table. And Boise State has already said they're going to look into it.
Yeah, because I mean, in reality, what's the alternative? Like you said, we don't know what this looks like in 10 or 15 years. Like, could this already, without trying to do anything like a private equity firm, could this already
Could you already be screwed?
Could you already be bankrupt as an athletic department? Could you already have to disband multiple sports and lose programs and not be anywhere near competitive in football or basketball just because you never took that shot? And so I know it's not the ideal thing to have to do, but in the grand scheme, it definitely could be a worthwhile shot. It could be your only opportunity left to get into a big Power Four conference. And that brings up even more complication, though, because it's like, what do the conferences even look like in 3 to 5 years? What happens there? But
private equity, an influx of money from a private equity firm does not guarantee that you'd get to that next conference. So again, there's pros and cons. There's risk versus reward here. You take on that type of money, you're taking a pretty substantial risk, but is there a reward you think you can get by taking